All right, welcome to the Golf Coach Podcast. Hugh, how you going, mate?
Yeah, I'm good. You?
I'm good. Actually, honestly, I'm a little under the weather. My voice is a little husky, but I
I'll
can get
be
to it.
I'll
My
be
wife,
gentle. I'll be gentle with you.
mate, I can take it all. I can take it. Hey, whereabouts are you, Hugh?
I'm just in the southwest of London. My facility's just outside the M25, the big motorway that circles London. So very central, near airports, near London. Got everything I need here.
Are you far from Lee Cox, the long drive guy?
He is the polar opposite side of London. He is the northeast side of London.
Well, the only reason I asked that is that because he mentioned like a big highway motorway thing to me as well when he came on.
Yeah, he's the other side.
How long have you been there for at that facility?
I've been here. I think this is our 10th year, so it's ninth or 10th year. So we started off with a pretty basic facility, and we've been able to slowly add to it on a year by year basis. We've now got two hitting studios, putting studio, short game area, putting green. It's a pretty good little spot.
How many coaches do you have there on board?
Good question. 6.
6. That's a lot. That's a lot of golf coaching. So that must be is that a big facility in the terms of things, the amount of coaches you got?
There's a lot of facilities with more coaches. I think one of the unique things that we offer is that we literally have everyone from 3-year-olds starting golf through to major winners and Ryder Cup players go through our doors, and we're very welcoming to all. We make a real effort to ensure that everyone is made to feel welcome, and there's an environment that's safe for people to play golf, that's enjoyable. There's a community element to it, so it's a pretty cool spot.
That's great, because it does take it. There is a specialty, right? To, it's difficult to cover all types of golfers as well, like as an individual golf coach. Like if you've got people there who specialize in junior programs, and people who specialize in tour players, and people who specialize in short game, it really does become the one-stop shop, right?
Yeah. I mean, and that's the intention, that we've got that we've got a place where people do feel welcome, that there isn't any hierarchy whatsoever. So we'll have, if we have a tour pro come through the door, he'll be having skills tests with juniors. He'll be competing against 14 handicappers, and it's just, as I said, I think one of the key components of coaching golf successfully is that we're doing something on a daily basis to grow and better the game, and that's very much reflected in what we deliver here and how we work.
Yeah. Hey, so tell me, right, so that's interesting that, right? But before you came into, you said there 10 years, what were you doing before that? Were you coaching somewhere else?
Yeah, I've coached at, I'm originally from the west of Scotland. I moved down here to London in 1999, and I've been based I've had 4 or 5 different bases over that 24-year period. Yeah. Ranging from very public to very private.
Yes. Hey, I've done that too. I used to be at Eleanor Country Club here in Australia, which is one of the most private golf clubs, to now being I'm at the most welcoming, open public golf course you can come to ever. We've got mini golf. We've got, driving range with, top tracer facility going in. It's
amazing.
Much polar different opposite like places. So tell me, when did you get so hungry to being a golf coach? Like, obviously we have golf coaches out there who we know, right? And then we have golf coaches who are just really hungry to keep learning and wanting to get really good. When did you notice that you were so heavily invested in coaching golf?
Oh, the minute I started playing. Yeah. I think that, we all have these terribly kind of grand ideas of playing PGA Tour, winning majors. And I was no different. The fact that I was completely crap was a slight barrier to achieving that. But when I look back, I started playing golf when I was 13, and even that first summer I was playing golf, I was trying to help my mum hit better shots when she walked around the golf course with me. So it's something that has been part of my kind of golfing DNA from the very start. I was always intrigued by it. Back in those days, there was no internet, obviously, so it was magazines, videos, books, and literally from the absolute beginning of my golf journey, I've wanted to know more, and that still is the case. However many, 37 years later.
Yes. Do you have that in other aspects of your life? Like if you end up watching the darts or watching football or, finance, do you always do you like to dissect that as well, or is it just golf?
No, it's not just golf, but there's nothing. It's not something that I apply to everything that is this, if you like, an interest or a pastime or a hobby. It's mainly golf.
Yeah. Mate, I love teaching, and my wife had. I used to even take the kids after when I used to coach them golf, and they had their old plates. I would let them drive my car home to teach them how to drive their car. Like, I was always just so engaged. I'd go, let's go pull in the car park and I'll show you how to do a reverse car park. Like, I always had that kind of knack to wanting to do that. And I'm the same as you. Like, when I first started coaching golf, first started playing golf, I always wanted to know why. And I remember I'd be in the backyard swinging a golf club, and I'd run in with my dad, and I'd say, Dad, if I keep the golf club head facing at the golf ball the whole time, I'm always going to hit it very straight. Dad's like, oh, well, we'll see how you go with that, son. I was always trying to work this out from a young age on why. So I kind of hear where you're going with that. So then you launched into tour coaching. Can we talk about your tour coaching? So, like, how did you get into coaching on the tour?
Completely by accident. I never had any ambition to coach on tour. That wasn't why I did it. And all I wanted to do was get better and ensure I always had the answers for the people I was coaching. And that's kind of shaped how I've gone about learning and developing. In that I just effectively, I've said this many times on many podcasts like this, that every student I coach is a case study. It's an opportunity for me to validate my principles, or it's an opportunity for me to challenge my principles. And that was very much the case when literally the first year I started coaching, that I figured that I got a good opportunity at a really big private club. And the best way for me to learn was just to make sure that I improved everyone. And that meant that if I didn't have answers, I had a very obvious red flag saying, Hugh, you need to go and learn this shit because you don't know it. And that's carried on. I mean, I've never been one for formal education. I've much more been a guy who's like, well, this is my journey. I'm going to use all these opportunities that I get on a day-to-day basis, what I call circumstantial learning. I'm going to use all of these opportunities to drive my improvement, to give me that opportunity to learn more. And the beauty of that approach was that everything I learned was relevant to students I already coached.
Yeah.
But the tour thing was, as I said, it was never an ambition. I just happened to be in the right place, right time. Someone asked me a question. I had an answer that didn't appall them. So I was...
Yeah. It's who was that first player?
First player I coached full-time on tour was Ollie Will.
Oh, really? He's a very good player. And how was that? What was it like adjusting to that? Were you traveling on tour and coaching at the same time?
Yep. And did that for too long. So basically I go to events and then come back and coach all my regular clients Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then get on a plane again Monday morning. So it was a pretty demanding lifestyle. And it was very new. I mean, it was something that once I got coaching on tour, I'm like, holy cow, this is pretty cool. But as I said, that's never what I set out to achieve. And it seems the generation of coaches just now seem to view that as being the kind of pinnacle of the career or the pinnacle of the game, that, well, if you coach on tour, you must be really good. So they then aspire to become that guy, and missing the fact that you actually need to be really fucking good at what you do to be there. It's no different to playing. If you're not one of the best, you don't survive. It's that simple.
Yeah. And it's pretty scary, I can imagine. And for me, I don't have any aspirations of being a tour coach at all. I don't. I got a young family. I enjoy my students. I enjoy traveling with my family. And I don't know if I could handle the pressures. You know, I go watch my friends or some students who play in Australasian tour events, or you know, I help out some people who play on like LAT Access, and that puts enough anxiety and fear through me as it is now. You know, like,
well, it isn't for everyone.
No.
And the truth of the matter is, we need expert coaches at every single level of the game. Yeah, it's the expert coaches should not be uniquely the domain of the top of the game. We need these people coaching recreational golfers, coaching kids. Because that's how we grow and better the game. And
I say this sometimes with a bit of tongue in cheek, but you get a 20 handicap golfer come to you who's swinging, 10 degrees across it, faces everywhere. That's a lot of work to get through that lesson. That's can be hard at problem solving. And then when I get some of my players who just come for a check-in, like my regular players who might play on the pro-am events around here or whatnot, and we just chuck them on, check them on the quad, check a few numbers, check where things are at. I'm not going to say it feels like a lunch break, but it's a lot less stressful, I should say. And not less stressful, I should say, but there's not as much testing of my brain going on to problem solve because I'm working with this student a lot. I'm seeing this person a lot. We've kind of got a bit of a clear path already that we've got in place. But
I'm not sure that I completely agree. I mean, it's at the end of the day, if you've got a guy who's 10 across it and the face is pointing in the inappropriate position, that's pretty easy to fix. I mean, ultimately, impact has no opinion. I think that the difficulty is dealing with the human being, where they're at, and that can be just as challenging whether they're a leisure player or a guy who's competing on the world tours. That coaching golf in itself isn't necessarily complex, but coaching human beings to play better golf is.
Mate, 100%. I was talking to one of my friends who's a golf coach in New Zealand about this a couple of days ago. He was talking to me. He sends me a couple of the students that he's working with, and I said, he told me how he would approach it. I said, yes, if that person was a robot, that's exactly what you would do.
Yeah.
Like you would plug this in, plug that in, but we need to understand where that player is and what that player understands, what impact is supposed to look like before you start plugging all these things that needs to happen.
Yeah.
Because each case, and I remember reading something from Butch Harmon said something like that, Hugh. He said, like, I don't coach golfers, I coach human beings.
Yeah.
Something like that.
We coach humans to play golf.
That's exactly what he said. It's exactly what he said.
And it's a very different thing. Because the truth of the matter is that the coaching process is in itself is relatively simple. We've got to figure out what is it about this player's impact we need to fix. We need to figure out why that's happening, and then we've got to figure out, okay, well, this is how I'm going to improve it. That's the coaching process. But we could be coaching the exact same principle to 10 different players, and we'd have to deliver it in 10 different ways.
Yes.
That's what still makes it a bit of fun.
Yes. And I'll tell you as well that you might notice while we're kind of on this as well is that I coach a lot of people who haven't had a whole lot of instruction before as well, Hugh. So a lot of my lessons haven't had a whole lot of instruction. So I think that plays a really major role as well. If people, one of my first questions to someone is, Hugh, have you actually had a golf lesson before? No. Have you tried to make changes to your golf swing before? No. I go, well, geez, I don't say this out loud, but I ask these general questions because I feel like as well that, do you think that plays a role as well? Like that molds a certain lesson type as well?
I think that raises an interesting point that when students come into our facility, we're entirely comfortable in those surroundings, right? This is our home. And an awful lot of the students that come in, and I've done some informal research on this with a psychologist friend of mine, that the vast majority of people that walk through your door are not in a position to learn. They're so massively out of their comfort zone. They're very much kind of in that fight, flight, freeze mentality. And the very first job of a golf coach is to get the player coachable. If they're not in a coachable place, then it doesn't matter how good the information, they're going to struggle to action it and retain it. So I think it's vital that we're cognizant of the fact that it's actually quite an intimidating environment walking into a golf lesson particularly for the first time.
I can't agree more. And that's and this is why people hear me talk a lot in this podcast about why I definitely hate but the one-off half an hour lesson model, because it just doesn't give enough time to get into a golf lesson. Like I think a lot of the first, I'll always say to everyone, like I tell them how it works. I said, I'd love you to hit 6 golf shots.
Yep.
I got you on the GC quad there. I'm going to start measuring you at 6 and 7. Your 6th and 7th shot, 5th or 6th shot, we'll measure, and I'll film the 6th and 7th one. But so as they're warming up, I'll ask them questions, trying to make them feel a little bit comfortable, because I think you got to find out where that person's at. And you might hear someone say, "Oh, I'm really nervous." Oh, okay, all right. Well, how's school? How's work? I always say, don't worry, you should see my first shot of the day. It was terrible. It hit the net too, or I shanked one yesterday. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a while. That's a very interesting point you make there about being coachable. What tricks and stuff do you use for that?
Again, I think a lot of it's down to the environment. So we've got the facility's nice. We've got a coffee machine, water. We've got wine. We've got beer. We've got comfy chairs. We've just, when everyone comes in, they're offered whatever they want to drink. They're encouraged to sit down and chill out. Just do everything we can to make them feel like this is a little less intimidating. Everyone that works here it's part of our sort of day-to-day working practice, that everyone that walks through the door, everyone says hello to them. Everyone, there's not people walking around with their head up their backsides. It's just making a pleasant place for people to be. I think that's the first, and then it's just a case of trying to. I mean, I do the opposite actually, in that I've got TrackMan running, and generally I'll have got video without them knowing I've got video. Just almost trick them into it, because it's again, we have to understand that there's so much about this. People walk in here and they quite rightly assume that they're going to be judged. And that's not a state of mind that the majority of human beings are comfortable with. I think one of the greatest issues with golf coaching that's very easily mitigated, that an awful lot of people believe that they go for a golf lesson and they get told everything they're shit at.
Yes.
And I think a really important way, or a really important tool you can use to help players feel more at ease, is actually say, well, actually, there's 3 or 4 things here that you're really good at. We're not going to change them. We're going to add to them. This is what we're going to build your golf swing around. So being able to identify the strengths as well as the weaknesses, and sharing the strengths, is a great way to get a player just to decompress a little bit and get in a state where they're coachable.
I tell you what, and people don't believe you too when you tell them that, right? Like when you have a lesson, I say, I actually love your golf swing. I love everything you do. You've just got a few little things in there that are causing, let's say slice bias in your golf swing. A few little things are causing this bias. If we mold these, you're going to be fantastic. And but they don't believe you. And then they'll top it and you'll go, actually, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I like where you're at. Hey, so tell me, Hugh, when you're talking about their coaching on tour, tell me a scenario, right, when you go to a tour event and you say you got a student, a player who is in a place where they might be asking you questions before a big tournament, and you might know the answers, but sometimes you might be a little hesitant. Is there any cases where you're sometimes hesitant to tell them what the answer might be because it might not be for the right particular time to tell them?
Again, I don't think I don't have a one-size-fits-all approach there.
Yeah,
and I don't think this is exclusive to tour pros. Just the consequence is more public and possibly more expensive for tour pros. But the truth of the matter is that you can look at a ton of different golf swings, and you can probably come up with a ton of different things that you'd like to see that player do differently. First job as a golf coach is to identify what I would call a characteristic rather than a flaw. Is this just this player's form that actually it's not having any ability to, or it's not changing the player's impact? Or is it something that's directly related to the player's impact? And that applies to club players as much as it applies to tour players. The truth is that you have to take every single player that's in front of you on what you see that day. So some players, it would be, we got 2 or 3 things that we need to explore here. This is where we're going to start. With some players, it's right. This is what it's going to look like, or this is where it needs to get to, and it's going to require a little bit of time working on it away from tournaments, a little bit of time working at tournaments. The truth of the matter is that every single golf lesson I give, I'm having that discussion. I'm hesitant to give any information to any player until I'm absolutely ready to give that information. For the simple reason that the minute that piece of advice has left your lips, you have lost total control over how it may be used.
Love that.
The minute something comes out your mouth, you have lost control over how it will be actioned, or whether it will be actioned at all. And that is where one of the downsides of, if you like, I'm always looking for characteristics of poor coaches and good coaches, and too much information would be the single most common characteristic I see from poor coaches. It takes time to own change. It takes time to master change. Now, that doesn't mean that it should take time to make change, but for that to stick, it will take time.
Oh, yeah. And when you see, like, I'm the first one to admit, in my early coaching career, I was an information overload expert. I spent too much time studying the golf swing before I became a golf coach, and just learning like crazy, like I always have. You know, like when I was from a young working in a pro shop to a trainee, or we call them trainees here in Australia, like apprentices, assistants, to being assistant, I was just always sucking information from every other golf professional around me, to the point that I go give a golf lesson. I just, early on in my career, it was just an information overload.
Yeah, just spew all over them.
Oh, just blurted it. And I apologize to people listening to this who I may have coached earlier, but and also just, I guess as well, Hugh, it's just stuff that's not relevant. You know, like for instance, someone might be having an issue at impact, like you know, you've been using that term impact, obviously 'cause it's the most important thing, using impact, and then I'm talking about something that's not even relevant to adjusting that impact position for the better. You know what I mean? Like I'm just opening my head, and I spoke to one of my coaches one of my coaches who I help a little bit out with his coaching, and I asked him, what are you doing with this student? And he told me a list of like 10 things. And I was like, holy crap, that's a lot. And I said, have you tried this impact drill? It'll actually tick off 6 of the things that you're trying to get there. You know? And he's like, oh, that's a great idea. I'm like, great. Like that one thing can do 6 out of the 10 things that you spoke about.
That lies at the very heart of great coaching. That for me, really effective coaching is being able to identify that one thing that you get 3 or 4 changes for free. And it is possible to do it.
Yeah.
It's something that you see every day.
Yeah. Did you have any wins on tour when you were coaching any players?
Yeah.
Yes.
Quite a few. Well, nice. I didn't have any.
I know, I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said it like that. I actually have just got it written down. I know which ones, but who? I
couldn't have done it without them. I mean, there's been. It's the funny thing is, even when I was coaching, I never really recognized and acknowledged how massive it is when a player wins a tournament, because it just doesn't happen that often. It was almost like, oh, he's won. That's what's supposed to happen. So I never really took any great satisfaction from players winning events. But ironically, I beat myself up way more when they were missing cuts or playing poorly, which clearly wasn't particularly good for my state of mind. But yeah, I can probably remember the wins that players I helped had, but I wouldn't say they were high points. Curiously enough, there's two Danish players I helped, and both won events very soon after I started working with them. And that really, at the time, that felt like something that was, well, actually, I might be quite good at this, because I suffered from massive imposter syndrome pretty much my entire career. And they were the moments where I'm like, actually, that's I might have something here. In terms of career highlights, they are actually not related necessarily to wins. The Paris Ryder Cup was insanely good.
Yes. Tell me why that was insanely good. Why was that insanely good?
I think it's because just for so many reasons, to be honest, Toby, that I'd grown up loving the Ryder Cup because it was such a unique event in the golfing landscape. You've got to play good for 2 years to get in, particularly as a rookie, because you're probably not going to get a wild card.
And was this Thorbjørn Olsen? Did I say that correct?
This was Thorbjørn. Yeah.
Thorbjørn Olsen. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Get going.
Yeah. And I mean the build up to it because he only secured his place relatively late. He secured his place at the tournament in Denmark, funnily enough. But he played so good for 3 or 4 months beforehand in the build up to it. So the sort of anticipation was growing all the time. And then for him to finally get over the line, he shot 64 final round in Akron at the WGC, which I think he finished second or third, which was a big step. And then the next week he comes back absolutely shot exhausted, finished top 10 at in Denmark, which is his home country, which secured his place. So that was pretty cool to be part of that environment. Thomas Bjorn did an incredibly good job as captain. He did an insanely good job. The vice captains he had were all extremely good, and you look at that team, that's arguably the best European team there's ever been. And everyone was playing well, and everything went right. Thomas did a great job of kind of including all the support staff as part of the team. So you felt that you were part of something, and then obviously to win was huge. For Tor to beat Jordan Spieth the way he did in the singles was huge. It was just a pretty cool experience. It's not... it's curious how I'll remember that more than I remember the wins players had.
And you know what? I think there's probably something to do with the environment of that tournament as well. Like, obviously, you've been watching the Ryder Cup your whole life as well, so you're looking at it and loving it and supporting it like absolute bananas. And all of a sudden, you're a part of the team. You know, like it's kind of like supporting Manchester United, and all of a sudden, you're
sat on the bench. Right?
Yeah. So, if I recall, was that just a really big Ryder Cup year that year at Paris? That was a massive one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was massive in terms of the physical staging of the event was huge. The grandstands, the way the course is laid out, the sort of grandstands, you're able to run all the way from almost 16 green behind 18 green to behind the first tee. So there was just a huge expanse of supporters. I was staying at the hotel on site, so I'm getting woken up at 6 o'clock every morning by them singing in the stand. Wow. And then you sort of, I never remember the Tuesday morning, you had to walk from the range over the bridge down to the first tee. And as we walked over the bridge, the noise was insane. And I'm like, I could barely freaking breathe. I'm thinking, how on earth do these guys get the ball to stay on a tee and then hit it? The utmost respect for all of them. It's staggering.
Mate, was that Paris? Is that when the first 3 holes or something where you kind of can watch all 3? Like if you're on the first fairway, you could have watched 2 other holes play at the same time.
Yeah, you can watch 1 and 2 or work around the same piece of water, and then third tee it's a little bit further away from it. But it was a great venue, and it's a great golf course. I mean, for what is effectively a pretty ordinary piece of land outside Paris, they've built a phenomenal golf course, and it was perfect for Ryder Cup. Just great memories.
And so, what was the winning score? Do you remember what year it won?
I can't remember the exact details, but Thomas Bjorn said beforehand that if Europe win, he'll get it to 2, and he'll get a tattoo. So. The memory I have, a hazy memory I have, is that who was it? Alex Noren holes from 65 feet to get a half with Bryson after Bryson had knocked it stone dead. Place went absolutely mental, and suddenly it dawned on Thomas that actually now that meant that we'd gained an extra half point, which meant that the tattoo, which he had on his ass, had to have another half point added to it.
That's so.
But it was funny. It was a pretty significant. It was, I think, one of the biggest European wins.
And would you? There's always conversations around. We've had our state of origin here in Australia, so NRL, which is New South Wales. It's massive, right? It's like nothing to the nth degree of Ryder Cup. And you'll find most people in Australia support Europe for some reason. We're all on Europe, right? Do you feel that Europe do Ryder Cup better than America? Or is it starting to shift a little bit? Or is that maybe no comment?
You know what? I think so much of it is down to I mean, it's nice to say, well, this captain does a great job, this captain didn't do a great job, but ultimately you need
Oh, okay.
12 players playing great, and if you've got a captain that brings them all together and creates a team environment, that may add something, it may not. But ultimately, the players still need to stand up and play their balls off, right?
Yeah, nothing better than the Molinari Fleetwood situation, right?
Mollywood.
Mollywood, that's right. That's right. Hey, all right, let's talk a bit about coaching. Can you tell me? I hear you use the term systematic coaching or golf coaching.
Yep.
Is that a term that you
Yep.
use? Can you explain to listeners? We have a lot of coaches listening. Can you actually explain what this is?
That's simple. That having a means to organize your coaching so that you know that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons with the best information available to you. That's simple. Knowledge is not the answer here. The ability to coach is entirely driven by how well you can organize and communicate what you want that player to do.
Interesting. So we're not talking method coaching, are we? We're just talking systematic coaching.
100% no. We're talking about having a structure so that you're able to analyze that player effectively, diagnose that player effectively, coach that player effectively, and then continually review as you work around that cycle. So analyze is, what's the ball doing? What's the club doing to the ball to produce that outcome? Diagnosis is, why is that happening? What is it about this player's start position or movement pattern that creates that club behavior that results in that ball flight? Coaching is how you choose to deliver your knowledge to help that player.
Love it. And this is something that you obviously got a big passion about coaching coaches, right?
Yeah.
Why? Where did this stem from?
As long as I've been coaching full time, I've been educating coaches. And I honestly don't know where it's come. I mean, I think that the motivator behind it is the same as just loving coaching. And it's not just a case of coaching golfers; it's coaching coaches. And you know what? I guess I was dumb enough to think that I had something that other coaches wanted to hear. This is going back 15, 20 years, 25 years. I guess I was dumb or arrogant enough to think that I had stuff that other coaches wanted to hear. They were dumb enough to come and listen to it. But the truth is that I personally have been very critical of the standard of golf coaching worldwide. This is not specifically aimed at the UK. I don't think we're particularly good at coaching golf, and I don't think we're particularly good at taking responsibility for improving our golfers. And I've basically got a choice. I can either bitch about it for the rest of my life, or I can stand up and say, right, I'm going to do something about it. And the majority of bad coaching is driven by, it's not necessarily knowledge driven. You've just alluded to it as a young coach. You knew an awful lot, but you were pretty useless at coaching. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of structure, the lack of system, the lack of organization, the lack of coaching skills that makes coaches poor at coaching.
Yes.
It's not a lack of knowledge. And particularly in this generation now, where for the first time in history as golf coaches, everyone has access to the same information. Okay? And that 28 handicapper, that rank beginner, all the way through to someone who's coached on tour, we all have access to the same information. So this is no longer an information battle. Mm-hmm. This is how we deliver that information and how we put that into the hands of the student to make them better. That's what's going to set you apart from the guy down the road. Not how much you know.
Yes, and also the use of that information positively. Like, you got to diagnose the person properly. Like you said there, you're talking 100%. About your systematic coaching. Like, the diagnosis is the most important part. Like, someone might say something along the lines of, that person's trail arm is too flex at the top of the backswing. It's going past what I like to see. And I go, well, that's not really affecting their ball flight in the particular way that the issue is. You know, like, I understand what you mean there. Like, people might see what they think to look for. Like, someone might, how often do we get told, I want to try and stop sliding my hips? And I'll often always say, well, why? You know, well, I'm okay for you to try and do something. Like, I do free swing analysis for people online, and people say, I'm trying to shallow it. And I just write back, why? Like, I understand you've seen all these things. Why do you want to do it? So it's interesting that you're kind of doing that because of what you're seeing as well, that you're trying to make a big impact on the industry. Do you think that do you think golf coaching, like that's one of the questions actually from one of the guys online on Instagram who answered the questions. Do you think golf coaching is getting better or worse?
We've got more information than we've ever had. We've got more research than we've ever had. We have greater access to information than we've ever had. And we're not any better.
Yeah.
Not going to say we're worse, but we're definitely not better.
Yeah. And I guess as well, what goes on with that when we're talking earlier about the student as well, there's too many students out there trying to find information that they just don't need because they don't know where they're looking. Would you agree?
No, 100%. And how? I mean, that's a big thing. How do you know what information is relevant to you? Which, I mean, let's face it. We know that the golfers who are basically randomly working through YouTube don't have those skills. But actually, do the golf coaches have those skills? Are the golf coaches able to think critically through something that's put in front of them and say, well, actually, from this perspective, it's really good, but what about X, Y, and Z? Why are they a good thing? Those critical thinking skills are non-existent in the industry. And unfortunately, the education for coaches is still very much driven towards getting more knowledge, buying more stuff, rather than, okay, well, how about you've got to give a golf lesson right now. So you've got to do the very best with the information you've got right now. Adding other stuff isn't going to help you.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think as well for coaches listening that do you think it's important to coach what you know as well? Not what you might see that someone else down the street coaches on Instagram you saw, kind of stick to what you know as well in the degree. Don't dive into situations that you don't know.
It's one of the first things that I say in all of the education opportunities that I offer, that you've got to become expert at coaching what you know.
Yeah. Okay.
And the first way to become expert at it is to genuinely understand what you know.
Yeah.
But because then if you've got this set of tools that you have this deep understanding of, it will tell you where your skills gaps lie.
Yeah.
And it will also help you with the critical thinking process to identify how good, bad, or indifferent your preferences are.
Interesting. Yeah. It's interesting because, just asking you as a question as well, like I have lots of different golfers models in my library that I use, right? Might be some right-sided golf swings, some Morad golf swings, some guys who are a little bit bigger across the chest type of golf swings. I find like that affects arm swings. A few of these different types of ones that I use, and I'll see someone come to me potentially for the first time, and I go, you know what? That person can do with a little bit of right side, a little bit of right side of this one here, or this one here could do a little bit of this. And it's not even so much based on the physical look of the person. It's based on how they decide to move that mass of a golf club around their body. Is that something that you do? Like, do you have different types of models when you're analyzing golf swings? Do you show people models of golf swings when you're teaching them?
No. I work on what I call a spectrum system. Yep. So that every movement, you can even start in setup, but basically every movement or setup option a player adopts will have an effect on that club's behavior. And it can only affect the club in 3 dimensions: up, down, in, out, roundabout. Okay, that's all we've got. Now, unfortunately, it's not that simple because we've got to attach a club face to the end, which is the most important bit. And then you've got to be able to organize that in time and space. So in real terms, we're dealing with 5 dimensions when it comes to every golf swing. So when you look at, you've got your different, if you like, different approaches, right-sided golf, Morad, etc., etc. I don't have any tags for it. It's just like, well, I've got right side bend, left side bend, flexion, extension. So if I need a player to be able to shift the path in a certain way, then I'm going to be looking at, basically, I open my toolbox and say, right, well, what are the path shifting tools that I've got available to me? So it could be as simple as ball position and handle position, for example. That would be a setup option. It could be that actually his setup's pretty appropriate and I need to find a way to get the swing direction more towards 0. So then I'm going to look at shift towards the target, increasing more shift towards the target so that we're able to straighten that swing direction. I find that having this approach, which I've developed from, and when I look back at it, I've been developing it since day one, but it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that it's become a sort of formal, if you like, system, that I'm constantly working along spectrums for every start position and movement option the player's got.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is you can say, well, okay, what's going to be the simplest way to shift this guy's path? Well, I know that if I put the ball back 1 ball and I stand the handle up 5 degrees, that path will shift left. Now, that path will shift to the right. Now, the beauty of that as a system is that I can tell the student, we're going to do this and this is going to happen. And when it does happen, the student goes, holy cow, that's awesome. Suddenly I look like some frickin' druid, where in reality, all I'm dealing with is a toolbox of components, all of which have a certain cause and effect in that player's ability to do impact.
Yeah. How important is it for the player to start addressing setup cues before they start looking at the golf swing?
That would be my bias, Toby. In that I think that, well, I don't think so. We know that start position gives you access to 2 things. It gives you access to appropriate impact geometry, and it gives you access to movement options. Now, the player may not choose to access them, but you've got to at least give them the chance.
Yeah.
And I will always start by, basically my analysis is, right, what's P7 doing? So what's impact doing? Okay, well, we know the ball's curving this way, and we know that's because of da-da-da. So then I will always go straight back to P1, say, what is it about this player's P1 that's influencing his P7? And that's where I will start every single session. Can I get low-hanging fruit just by shifting the handle position, for example? Yeah. Now, if I can't, then my analysis becomes my diagnosis becomes a little bit broader. So I'm starting to look at where the club is in space to affect P7. That make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, of course. I love it. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think they're the lessons when you look more like you said, like people are just jumping out of their skin of excitement when you can make some simple adjustments like that, because anyone can move a ball position on the ground. It's not like you're asking them to do something that they can't physically do.
Correct. I mean, it doesn't require talent. Now, no. It may require the coach to give them tools to be able to practice it. But again, we've all got that at our disposal. You don't need to be a super talented coach to be able to get someone to set up to it properly.
And that as well comes exactly. It's like, yeah, I was talking to the general manager at my golf course the other day. He said to me, Toby, I need a certain golfer, female golfer, for the video we're doing. We've got a video we're doing, and he said, do you have any? I said, I could just get my wife to set up to it. And she goes, is she golfs? I said, no. I said, I can make her look like she golfs. It's like, I could put her in a setup position and make her look like she golfs if you needed to. It's like, hey, so tell me as well, like you were talking there about setup and influence of ball position as well as obviously a big one. And we also have alignment affects ball position on the ground as well, right? It affects low point from where our body's aligned. When you give lessons, do you have an alignment tool on the ground first, or do you let them?
No, I will always let them. I'll always let them freewheel it first of all, rather than. I mean, I've got a ton of really basic training aids, but rather than put something on the ground, I'll generally draw on the ground.
Yeah.
Simply because they can actually hit from directly above the. Say I'm drawing a crosshair, and maybe I've got an angled line in there for shaft position. They can hit from bang on the crosshair, which you can't do with sticks. I'll use a lot of kids chalk. Is my favorite training aid.
Because I've found a lot through my coaching. You know, the first thing I did was I used like some they're called T-claw. It's just like a string on the ground. I think. Anyways, I found that so many people's alignments are so poor that it's having a massive effect on how they're moving the golf club, and a massive effect on what's happening at impact. And that's where getting people comfortable to even set up in a certain manner because I was just having them already aligned already, Hugh. So there's the 125 barrels. I've already calibrated this person to be dead straight. And then I'll say to them all the time, they say, "Oh, I never hit that shot." And I go, "Well, geez." And then I had to start taking away the alignments to see how they would actually align their bodies properly. And I go, "Well, that's why you never hit it, because you're always aiming for it." you know? So,
and that's where it's, again, your analysis and diagnosis needs to be so robust. Because effectively, if you get your analysis and diagnosis wrong, that player is only going to hit better shots by accident.
Yes.
You've done nothing.
Yeah.
That's where it has to start. And if you've got those alignment aids down, you're already contaminating their process. You're not getting an objective perspective on what they do as golfers.
Yeah. Yes. I understand. It was a mistake I made too. Oh, I made. Sorry, not saying you did. I made the mistake with the alignment.
Oh, we've all been there. Trust me, we've all been there.
It's Tell me, right? So obviously, measuring for you is super important. I think you've used the term evidence a lot. Objective. Tell me what certain tools do you use at work to measure?
TrackMan.
Coaching. Yes.
Hack motion occasionally. Swing cat. That's about it from a measurement perspective. If I'm lucky in that I share a studio with Dr. Mark Bull, so if ever I need to do any kind of biomechanical analysis, then I'll call in Bully. But my measurement is very much about measuring the golf ball more than anything, because in real terms, we can only influence the ball in three ways. Okay, the speed it leaves at, the spin it leaves with, and the trajectory that it's on, and that trajectory is up and down and side to side. Okay.
Yeah, spin covers a lot of strike, right? Yeah.
And speed covers a lot of strike, and trajectory covers a lot of strike. The truth of the matter is that if we make everyone's golf ball with a more appropriate trajectory, with more speed and less spin, we've done a great job.
Love it. Tell me, can you tell me on the as I saw the other day, someone Joseph Mayo coaches on the PGA Tour. He's always putting out some exciting content for us.
He loves to have a little prod, doesn't he?
Anyways, he calls himself he goes pronouns TrackMan Maestro. That's his pronouns on his Instagram page, which he is a bit of a TrackMan guru. Tell me about can you also educate me on how people chase zero outing a path and zero, club face angles. Have you got with a lot of the expert players? You've coached a lot of tour players, right? Like a lot of high class players. Was there many case studies with those guys? How they might play really well with a path 5 right, or swing direction 6, or like how much is chasing zero an important or not important thing?
Chasing appropriate is important.
Yep.
And if zero's appropriate, then chase 0.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you want a player to hit push draws, then impact has no opinion. It's a binary equation. It's geometry and physics. That's impact. So you've got to ensure that the data you're chasing is appropriate for the shot the player wants to hit.
Yeah. Because I talk to where that question kind of stems from as well is that I find that people want what they don't have, right? It's just the grass is always greener. So I've got someone who might play particularly well with I believe play particularly well within what I'm seeing as my thing, as let's say negative path, face slightly open to it and hitting nice little cuts, right? And that person goes, I want to hit draws. I'm like, oh God. Or I want to hit it straighter. Like, oh, okay. There's a lot that goes into that, don't you agree? About just shifting potentially, if you're not getting stuff done for free, say that person might have the hand path a little out or shaft a little steep on the way down, and you're like, that's a big change to kind of lay that shaft down.
Well, I think it's the players, particularly with top level players, it's the player's job to determine what ball flight they want to hit.
Yeah.
What shape they want to hit. Now, it's the coach's obligation that if you are in disagreement that you think this player is going to be better off hitting a certain shape, then you've got to have the discussion. But it's for the player to tell you what he wants the golf ball to do. And then it's for you to figure out the best way to help that player do it. And that best way, in my terms, is what's the least invasive way to get that player to hit that ball flying. Now, with good players, I'm a great believer that good players have a specific shot shape that if they work against that shot shape, they hit it well. So, for example, Torbjorn, if Torbjorn's hitting it left, if he works against a left shot, he hits it better. Because basically he's got to shift the path or swing direction a bit to the right, and then he hits better shots. Whereas if he's fighting a right shot, the fixes that he, or if you like, the move he makes to fight a right shot and make it appropriate is so far away from a good golf swing for him that right misses is something we never want to see. If he's starting on line and turning it 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters, happy days, because the way he's going to straighten that out is much more appropriate.
Interesting.
It's and each player, particularly good players, they have that kind of DNA. It's like, okay, well, actually, if you're working against this shot, you're in a good place. If you're working against this shot, you're probably not. But ultimately, it's all about shifting impact to something that is more desirable. That we know, if you get a zero swing direction, you're hitting down in at 5 degrees, the pass 3.5 right, you're hitting the middle, and the face is about 2.5 to the right. You know that's going to produce a high draw. To the point where if you give the launch angle and the spin rates and the speed, you can also say to the meter how far that ball's going to go.
Yeah, it's crazy.
No opinion to that.
No, it's not. It's just the rules.
If you're not advising a player, if the advice you give a player doesn't produce the desired numbers, it can't produce the desired flight.
Yes.
End off. There's no debate there.
No, not at all.
There is no room for discussion on this.
Yeah, no. And tell me, when we keep talking about measuring stuff here, I've been talking to Grant Field a little bit about this. It's 3D. He did some stuff with 3D recently.
Yep.
Can you dive into? Can you explain to everyone what 3D measuring is first?
Well, it's basically just measuring how the body moves in space and time.
Yeah. And they measure the golf club at the same time?
Mm-hmm. Some do, some don't. I personally think you've got to measure the club.
Yes.
But yes, some systems and some coaches do measure the club, some don't.
And how useful have you found this as a coaching tool for you, having access to it?
There's certain elements of it that I absolutely love. That basically the good systems you can use audio feedback so that you can the player gets audio feedback if he moves into great space or into poor space. I think that's a great way to learn, because the player then starts to solve the problem themselves. What do you mean? If I keep this sound on, I'm moving well? Yeah, okay. So just keep that sound on. That's a great learning tool, and it's that audio feedback mechanism is not something that we typically use as a learning tool. The biggest benefit for me is that it has accelerated my understanding of anatomy and what the human body is capable of, to the point where I'm a much better golf coach because of it. The vast majority of technology, the single biggest benefit it's been to me is that TrackMan, my eye is much, much better as a product of using TrackMan for 12 to 15 years.
Yeah,
it's helped me develop my skills rather than explicitly help the player. Because remember, these are measuring tools. They're there to help us. They're there to help us analyze and diagnose. They're absolutely useless when it comes to coaching.
Yes, yeah. What you're saying there is that you're really good at collecting data on the eye now.
Yeah, correct. And collecting data is not coaching.
Yes. And as I think I heard. I shouldn't say think. I heard Claude Harmon say once, if you're surprised at the TrackMan number or the GC quad number, then you're in the wrong game.
Yeah.
Essentially, he said, if you're surprised, I thought that was a really good one line,
100% agree.
Straight up. And I thought that's really good. And you know what Claude did is he used to go study his dad coach, right? But he would put the camera, he would watch the other way. So he would have the camera in front of the player watching his dad coach. And his dad, Mr. Butch Harmon, obviously would come around and watch Claude coach. And he'd pick him up all the time. He'd like, Claude, you let that guy hit too many bad shots in a row. And so
Yeah.
what I love about listening to Claude talk about coaching is that he constantly talks about coaching. He doesn't talk about, he talks about like the data, and obviously he's an amazing golf coach, but he talks about coaching a lot, which I like. Not so much about, we're doing all these studies and stuff about 3D and things like this.
If you look at his coaching journey, if you like, he's been surrounded by golf coaches. He's not been surrounded by scientists. And this is one of the things that really irritates me about golf now, is that we've got two groups of coaches. We've got scientists who think they're golf coaches, and more concerningly, golf coaches who think they're scientists. Now, we can learn an extreme amount from all communities within the game, but stick to your freaking lane.
This is what I said in my head. I just said that. Yeah. I just said stay in your lane.
Now, our job is to make players better, and I'm certainly my bias, my natural tendency is that the more information I have, the better placed I am to help that player. But yeah, let's stick to our own lane, because being able to spew data, research, information is not coaching.
Yeah.
Coaching is saying, right, I'm going to pick this piece of information and I'm going to put it to this player in this way, and I'm going to give him these tools and these practice routines. That's coaching.
Yeah.
Because our players pay us to make them better. We are not paid by the word. We are paid to make players better.
Right. Number one rule, don't fuck them up.
Yep. Don't fuck them up. Absolutely.
Number two rule, make them better.
Yeah. do the least damage to the fewest amount of players. It's not an enviable ambition, but it's a pretty decent start point.
Oh mate, I completely. I'm loving this. It's been fantastic, and it's interesting that you talk about that, because there is roles for everyone within golf, right? And I think golf coaching, one of the major strengths of golf coaching is communication of information, right? Like,
yes, particularly when you're working across a kind of broad team of specialists, for sure.
Yeah, and I think when you have, like, I don't want to pigeonhole people, but scientists and these data collector people, they might be amazing mathematicians and physics and understand movement and how this stuff's going, but their coaching skills particularly might not be there due to the nature of they haven't been in the forefront of coaching people for a long time. So you got these scientists who have never given a golf lesson, and you got someone who might have given 25,000 lessons. The scientist might know more why things are happening, but the other golf coach is the golf coach.
And scientists are accustomed to working in controlled environments. So whenever any research is done, there are controls put in place. The challenge of playing golf for a living, or playing golf on a Saturday and Sunday because you love it, is that there are no controls in space. Right? We're playing in an environment of infinite variable. So while research sounds sexy, and it definitely can help, can inform us to better coach, there's always going to be shortcomings to research.
Yeah.
Because there are inevitably going to be controls in place.
Tell me also about measuring, right? I've just partnered, not partnered with, but a lot of my students are now, I've probably got 40 students using Draw More Circles, stat and benchmarking collection kind of app. And I'm really enjoying it, right? And what I've actually noticed about the measurements of it, right, because you mentioned the word control and it just triggered something in my head, is that we measure a lot of practice because we can kind of control the environment a little bit more. So, for instance, which I've loved learning from it. He's coming on the podcast again, Craig. He's a data scientist, but I've loved learning from him in regards to we train and measure, say, a 5-yard chip shot from off the green, because we can control that environment a lot, because we can have the same pin position, same balls. And then he talks about not measuring much on the golf course during play. They just measure some basic stuff. And then I was watching Victor Hovland play recently, and I think he might have had a win. And I watched him down the 72nd hole. He had He was up against the first cut of rough and the first fairway, pins back left, wind off the left. He's had to hit this 8-iron. He's already got a little fade. You know, hits that little stock fade. And I'm sitting there, and he's on the scenario. There's 100,000 people watching. It's to win a golf tournament. And I'm going, man, that environment is so different to trying to measure. You plug that into your stats collection app. He hits it 25 feet. 25 feet's a great shot from in that situation. But at, you know, Thursday at the Barbasol Championship, 8-iron from there to 25 feet might not be his favourite. So when you measure, do you measure a lot of training or play? Like, how do you go about that?
I like to put players through variable training when I'm coaching them, and have different ways of kind of layering that up and making it harder and harder. But the truth is that as you just pointed out, the practice environment and the competitive environment are so different. And it's very difficult to prepare a player to hit that shot that Victor's hit, right? Yeah. Because as you point out, suddenly you've got a lie that you've probably never been faced with, in a situation you've never been faced with more people than have ever watched you hit a golf shot. Now, I'm not sure how you prepare for that, other than giving players robust processes and routines. And funnily enough, Nathan, who got beat in the playoff last night, I had a conversation with him this morning, and he's like, well, just all I did was, I'm disappointed not to have won. I'm disappointed to have lost in a playoff. But I did everything I could because my routines and processes on Sunday were exceptional. I'm like, okay, that's all you need to know. Yeah. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. You're not in control of that, but you are in control of attitude and intensity of process, the purpose in your process. So you can train it to a point, but you've just got no idea how that player is going to respond in that situation.
Oh, when you were talking about there at Paris, how you couldn't hear yourself think, or you were shaking a bit nervous watching your player play in the Ryder Cup. I caddy for some players I caddy for a player recently and a friend of mine at the Australian PGA Championship. He hit his tee shot down the first, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous, Hugh. Like, I caddied for him. I wasn't supposed to caddy for him. I called him up because I was doing a thing with the PGA up in Queensland, and I was flying up there, and it was the same week. And I was just thought I'd call him just to say, because he could come stay with me because he hasn't got I shouldn't say, a lot of players playing on these mini tours. I thought I'd give him some free accommodation and I'll help him out. And then he goes, can you caddy? My caddy's down. And I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And mate, it was A, super tiring, and B, so stressful. I'm never doing it again.
No. But everyone's going to do it once just to figure out how shit it is.
Oh, never again. I've said to him at the end of it, I said to him, I'm very sorry. I think I'm a good golf coach. Like, I'm doing my best to be a golf coach, but I am not a caddy, and I won't be doing that again.
It is a different set of skills.
He's never asked me again.
Yeah, it's telling you something.
Oh, mate. We had the party hole too. There's a party hole there, and there's big grandstands, and this is new to him, There's the big grandstands, the music's pumping. There's the greens risen there. I think it was Royal Queensland, maybe. I can't remember. Indooroopilly, risen green, and he was shaking, putting his ball in the hand. I saw him, so I ran over with the bag. You can see me. You right, mate? Is everything okay? And he's like, and he said to me 4 times in a row here, he's like, 131? I said, yeah. 131? I said, yes, Andrew. You listening?
That comes straight back to the point I made earlier about making sure a player is coachable. He's in such a state of fear that he cannot process basic information.
Wow. Yeah.
That's so what happens when players walk into our studios.
You're spot on. Absolutely spot on. And oh, mate, it was. I just got goosebumps thinking about it. Then I was even nervous for him. He had a good golf shot, to be fair, the first day. We didn't play the weekend, obviously. Hey, can you tell me as well? I always say that. I shouldn't say that. Can you tell me? But I've got written here that I really want to ask you. This is the last thing I've got written down. Is the use of training aids in your lessons, the use of drills, and how do you suggest that someone should organise, say, their training? If they're on the driving range, go and hit some balls. I know it's a very broad spectrum, but the difference between using training aids, difference between doing drills and training and hitting balls.
I think there is there's a number of questions here. Number one,
Yeah.
I think when it comes to training aids and drills, it has to, number one, have a direct impact on what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Because so obviously and again, you can measure that if you give someone a training aid and you ask them to use that training aid. However, does it fundamentally shift the data towards something more appropriate?
Mm-hmm.
Number one. If so, it maybe has a place. It's important that training aids never become crutches.
Yeah.
I think training aids. Basically, they can do the right thing with it, but can't do it without.
Yeah. Okay.
Training aids, if they provide the player access to better data or a better impact position, then the training aid there is for one reason and one reason only, and that is to help the player develop the feel of correct. I see a ton of great training aids, and I certainly don't mind using a training aid, but I'd still rather they were able to do it without. And drills fall into much the same category, to be honest, Toby, that ultimately if the player can do the drill well, is it creating better movement that creates better impact? Yes. Okay, let's proceed with it. No, sack it off. It's there just to help the player establish the feel of a more appropriate move. That's it.
And when a student has, say, a player listening to this has gone to the driving range after having a lesson, so that you've not obviously, but you may have prescribed them a drill or an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So they go hit 100 balls, right, over an X period of time. How many do you expect that player to hit their last certain amount of shots as a full swing, or how do you expect they should put it together?
Generally, I'll advise them, depending on the type of player, depending on how they best process information, that I use a lot of what I would kind of call progression drills or drill matrices, where they've got 2 or 3 drills that are all targeting the same thing in a subtly different way, because that'll help them understand which drill's best for them. I'll do an awful lot of, right, we're going to do first shot with the drill, second shot with the drill focusing on the movement, third shot trying to hit a great shot. I'll mix it up an awful lot depending on what the player is, or where the player's at, how they best process information, where they are in a tournament cycle. It chops and changes all the time. Some players don't particularly respond to drills or training aids. Some absolutely love them, and there's not a direct correlation between some of those players being more or less successful than others.
I find myself as a golf coach, I can make them. I feel like at times I'm asking that question it was a loaded question. It was coming from myself wanting to learn, because I get someone doing a drill, Hugh, and when I say a drill, like it might be a 3/4 swing or a hold off finish or something in particular, or it might be a little bit of a pause or something like this. I'm talking about those types of swing, and I see them do it so well, and I go, Hugh, I wish they just did that forever. That 15 handicap golfer just doing that little exercise, they can break 80 more times than not. And I just feel like, and they go, can I do a normal swing now? I'm like, oh, can you just do that forever, please?
Yeah.
So it's tricky to bridge that gap, right? But and I got one question here from, do you know a gentleman named David Atkins from Ignite Golf?
I know Dave, yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, that's good. Said that with a smile, David. He said top keys to a good coaching system, which you've probably already mentioned.
Effective analysis.
Yeah.
What is it about this player's ball flight and impact that needs to be improved?
Yeah.
Effective diagnosis. Why is that happening?
Yeah.
And the most important thing is how you are going to improve it, the coaching process. What, why, how? And on top of that, having an ongoing review process to ensure that you're basically double checking yourself. Has that piece of information had the effect I'm looking for? If not, what's plan B? If it has, where do we go next with it? But if you don't get the analysis correct, then you're not going to get the diagnosis correct, and then it doesn't matter what the heck you coach, you ain't going to get it right.
Yeah. You're just going to try. It's just thrown.
You do that, you've got the basis of a great coach.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I love that. And I think what I also love about that as well, Hugh, is if you do a good, in my case, if I take my time, this is kind of why I sometimes don't mind. I like online coaching, Hugh, is because I get the swings, I get the information, and I can just watch it and sit on it for a while. Because I ask for a lot of information from my students. I ask for a lot of information
Yeah.
because sometimes I'm not ready to I'm not ready to open my mouth. Sometimes
But, you,
I kind
but,
of
you,
like that.
but you've got the same luxury in a golf lesson, Toby.
Yes.
You don't need to give. You don't. They're not paying you for a quick answer. They're paying you for the right answer.
Oh yeah, I agree. I was just talking about a benefit of online, but I do like that as well. That's why my in person stuff, I only do minimum 1 hour lessons for that
Yeah,
reason. But
same.
if you do a very good analysis at the forefront, then what you're giving yourself options as well, because you can try, like you said, option A. Actually, that person didn't respond very well to that, or that wasn't enough, that setup cue, or I can do B, C. It's like I know what the wrong one. I know what the issue is. I just need to get
And
it. We need to get it
you're
right.
absolutely right. And I don't think there's any harm in telling the student, listen, I got 3 or 4 options here. This is the one that I think that historically has worked the best. So we're going to start here, see how you respond to that. It's no different to going to the doctor. I got 3 different medicines I can give you, but this is the one that's been proven to work the most often with the most people. So let's start there. If that doesn't
Yeah,
work for you, then potentially we've got some other options. But
yeah,
you need to have these. You need to have these options, right? That you need to be in a position where you've got plan A, B, C, D, and not just if things don't go to plan, but if you nail it, where are you going to take it after that?
yeah,
You've got to be able to predict where you're going. And I talk about it as sort of as a coach. I always want to keep the road ahead of me. I don't ever want to have to backtrack. Which is why,
Interesting.
again, a system and structure is so important, that you're organizing your information at a certain time in a certain way for that player. So you're
Yeah,
constantly moving forwards because you can't retract information. Once it's out your mouth, it's gone.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Very careful
Can't take
to.
it back. You can't say, listen, Toby, forget about that. That was shit.
Yeah, 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 and yes, yeah, and yeah. I can't agree with you more. I can't agree with you more in regards to being very careful when you open your mouth. And also, you mentioned imposter syndrome there, and I also want to ask you about that because I think, myself, I drive to work probably once every couple of weeks here, and I go, I might be listening to a podcast or talking to another golf coach, and I go, I don't think I know what I'm fucking talking about. Like I have this issue in my head, and I go, I can't believe I'm about to charge people today for a golf lesson. I can't believe I've got someone driving 2 hours to come see me today. Like, and I have that come into my head sometimes. Do you think that has driven you, Hugh, to wanting to get to know the answers and get better?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I genuinely don't know. I mean, I'm very fortunate in that a huge part of my life now is helping other coaches become better. And pretty much every single person has expressed or shown signs of imposter syndrome. Some, it absolutely cripples them. Generally, if I see a coach who hasn't got imposter syndrome, I'm more nervous about him than the ones that are
Okay, that's good.
that do, because I think it's part of being a high functioning human is understanding your shortcomings, because that's all that it is. And I mean, there's no doubt that I felt that for a large part of my career, I felt totally out of my depth and basically felt that I was stealing a living. But then you take a step back and think, okay, well, actually, you know what? I've helped way more players than I've made worse. Pretty sure my record of improving players is better than pretty much anyone on the planet who coaches for a living. When you start to look at it objectively, it's like, okay, yeah, I must be okay at this.
Yeah, okay.
But I personally think that imposter syndrome is a very healthy characteristic. It shows a degree of honesty. It shows that you're very conscious of helping everyone in front of you, and you're aware that when you're not helping them. I think it can be a very difficult thing to live with, but I do think it's necessary as part of the growing process and the coaching process.
Yeah, yeah. I nearly doubted myself the other day. I had a lesson. I had to push everyone back 25 minutes. I had a struggle, which doesn't really happen very often. But I was like, you know what? I said to this guy, I said, we're not leaving. You're not leaving today until we get this, like I said, everything's going to be okay. Let's sit back here. And then had to just text everyone on my lesson list. Lessons today are 25 minutes late. Sorry guys. And I was driving home and I was just like, I'm glad I had the nuts to do that. But I was like, I need a break or what, you start getting your own head. I'm like, how did I not get that answer right the first fucking time? Why did it take me 3, and I start getting in my own head driving home. And then anyway, so it's interesting that
if you look at it this way though, I think it's very healthy because number one, you've recognized that frustrates you and that's going to drive you to get better. And it's going to drive you to get better specifically for one of the people you coach. All of that's a good, honest motivation, right?
Yeah.
And the beauty of imposter syndrome is that it red flags where you have skills gaps.
Yes, interesting.
And if you don't have imposter syndrome, there's nothing telling you where you need to improve.
Yeah. Yeah.
So while it can suck, and it's a pretty painful thing to go through occasionally, it's great for your development, and it's just a sign of good, honest coaching.
It's interesting when you said there as well, Hugh, you said about someone not having imposter syndrome. I kind of thought about the word that came to my mind was probably not open-minded.
Potentially there'll be more of a closed mindset. Potentially, I mean, there could be a number of reasons behind that. But don't be afraid of imposter syndrome, guys, because honestly, it's something that it doesn't feel great, but actually it's very healthy.
Well, you know Mike Tyson. You know what drove Mike Tyson was the fear of getting hit.
Yeah,
that's not the only reason. Sorry, I heard on a podcast him talk about. They said, "What drove you?" And he's like, "I just never wanted to get hit. I was too scared to get hit." He was scared to get hit. So one of the things with 3D, and I'll let you go after this, right? And I guess the imposter stuff comes to me sometimes, Hugh, when I do some study and, I like to watch the guys with Athletic Motion, or I'll read up on, like I was talking about Mark Bull stuff, and you've all of a sudden best mates with him, known him for longer than I've been alive and all this stuff. And I think that's when I come across some information that I've never heard before. And I go, oh, that makes sense. And I go, crap, how did I not, but when I'm learning, that's when it tends to kick in as well. When you started seeing 3D, was there anything that kind of surprised you, or measurements, or gave you something that you were happy to see, or clarification, or?
Oh, it still does. But I can't. Yeah. I mean, I can't look at a 3D graph and understand it, even after 25 years of looking at them.
Yeah.
But then, I'm not a doctor. I can't figure out the cure for cancer. It's not my lane.
Yeah. Okay, I get you. Yeah.
It's the reality is be expert at what you need to be expert at. And I experience this an awful lot with coaches when they say, well, actually, I come and spend time with coaches and that other coaches, so they come to a camp that I run or whatever, and they all get, oh God, I feel so dumb. There's so much I don't know. I'm like, but the minutes being surrounded by stuff you don't know is not a bad thing. Number one. Number two, of course you don't. If you don't know it, how do you know that you need to know it?
Yeah.
It's okay to not know stuff.
It's interesting, actually.
And of all the stuff that you've made comments in that same environment where other coaches have gone, oh, holy shit, Toby knows more than me there. That's just life. It's definitely not something to be frustrated by.
Can you share with me a little bit before, like, just to let people where they can catch you? So I have, like, honestly, here we have a lot of coaches who listen to this. Like,
well, my website is hughmarr.com, and that's got details of all the coach education opportunities that I run, from my coach mastery program through to the camps I run, the videos you can buy, and I also you can get me on the Hugh Marr Coaching on Instagram. That's my only social media platform.
Yeah. And
that's basically it. And I just want to hear from as many coaches as possible who are experiencing what we've talked about today, because I want to help them become better golf coaches.
And what does that look like, Hugh? So when they get onto your website and they jump in there, what is your, like, can I use the term program? Like, what is it?
Yeah. So basically I started the Coach Mastery program in April 21. So I've now ran 4 programs. There's another 2 starting in 3 weeks' time, and basically this is a deep dive into great coaching practice. It's certainly not for everyone. It's time consuming. It's something that it's a full year program, which is delivered kind of a hybrid model of online and in person. They get time in a group. They also get one-to-one time with me within that. A number of assignments set over the course of the year that are reviewed by myself and an academic tutor who's involved in the program. And this is something that basically COVID put me in a position where I had to figure out what I was going to do next, because I knew I wasn't going to go out on tour for much longer. And my passion for helping golf coaches get better at it, helping golfers get better through better coaching, drove me to putting this program together. Now, on top of that, I offer private mentoring services. There's a ton of videos with myself, featuring myself, Alex Buckner, Tom King, Andreas Cayley. So I basically drag my friends in to talk about golf, and I also run a number of coach camps over the course of the year as well. So it's there's something in there for everyone in terms of accessing tools that will make you better at coaching.
I love it. And I keep hearing you, listening to you talk today, and we just don't have anything like this in Australia.
There isn't anything like this in golf. I'm lucky in that I've got the market to myself just now.
That's true, actually. I was thinking about you in London, and this is a rare thing. People listening to this, like our education as golf coaches, up until now, it's all been through, our PGA, which is very little what we learn, and from there, it's about us going and source it ourselves, essentially.
How do you know what's good? How do you know what's relevant?
Oh, it's very challenging, and I've been through. I've flicked through all the methods, Hugh. I shouldn't say like all the methods, but I've been through. I won't, give them all the names, but all the regular ones, and found myself back where I am. And what you've got is not so much. It's more about this systematic approach to the coaching side of it, data fueled. And I like it. And every time I see you and Clappy and Pete, all going to your little golf school thing, I'm like, man, I wish I could go.
Well, I'll come down to Oz. I'm quite happy to come down and talk to you guys down there.
We could run them. Seriously, Hugh. I've got a big audience here in Australia, and it would be exciting.
Let's do it, man. It's right on my street.
A lot of golf coaches would be all over it. So that's unreal. I'll put all your stuff below in the show notes for coaches listening to this anyway, and they can reach out to you as well.
Always, reach out direct via Instagram or email or however you want.
Follow Hugh on Instagram. It's actually some really nice educational stuff, and he doesn't miss too. He flies from the hip, so it's a little bit of excitement as well on what you're going to get, and there's no pussyfooting around. And I tell you what's interesting was sometimes I see Hugh post something and I go, oh, I actually saw that person do that before, and I was a bit surprised by that post, and I see you don't miss it.
I mean, I'm not setting out to piss people off directly, Toby, but I think that there needs to be someone sort of, not that it's necessarily my role, but there needs to be someone doing something to actively challenge the industry. I'm not trying to piss people off. I'm just trying to say, listen, we can do a much better job of this, and we all have a role to play in that.
And I tell you what's quite interesting. You say that when you look at social media and stuff, and I very rarely now post tips, and I don't ever turn the camera on and post a tip. It might be like me just uploading students or a reel, or I'm very careful now. And that, to be honest with you, Hugh, it's a lot of it was driven from when you started it, and you started and I started viewing it, and I would call Jay Kelly, friend of mine, and we'd talk to each other and go, we don't even know what to post on Instagram. Like I was talking to Pete about it too, about the responsibility of a golf coach. And it definitely changed my direction a couple of years ago. And people have asked me about why I don't actually post golf tips anymore. And I just realized that every time I go to post a golf tip, I just go, this is not helping the collective. Do you agree?
I got some great advice, 25 years ago from Dennis Pugh, who's a dear friend of mine, been a great mentor of mine over the years. And at the time I was starting to write magazine articles. Okay. And I'd gone to Dennis and said, listen, Dan, I need some help here, man. What am I going to do with this? And he goes, right, it's really simple. If you set out with the attitude of you're going to do the least harm to the fewest people and then write your article, you'll be okay. And he's right.
Yeah.
Because you can, by and large, stick to absolutes when you're putting this instructional content out or this coaching content out.
Yeah.
And those absolutes are going to be driven by what you need the club to do to the ball at impact. But you could also talk about, well, if I'm trying to hit this shot, this is how I do it and what I feel. But as soon as you start to sell it as every tour pro does this, as soon as you start to say it as all good golfers do this, or this drill will fix everything, or this you'll never slice again if you do this, that's the kind of bullshit that just drives me fucking potty. It's just,
and people listening to why that drives Hugh fucking nuts is because Hugh has seen a ball flight move in many different directions with many different influences by the body doing it as well. It's not one way to do one thing, so, yeah. Oh, mate, I agree. But, you've highlighted it, and I guess you've brought a sense of awareness to coaches. And I think the term responsibility, when I was talking to Pete about responsibility a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago or something, and it really sat with me. I sat on it all night and the next day thinking about shit. We've got an audience. We're responsible for what gets out there.
And you guys who've got big followings, and you are influential in the world of golf, and you're probably way more influential than you believe you are, to the point where there are coaches now, young coaches who aspire to be Toby McGeehee more than they aspire to be Butch Harmon. And that is crazy. Absolutely the truth. That there are people who they believe that great golf coaching is online golf coaching. They believe that being a Rick Shields is coaching. I have the utmost respect for guys who produce really good social media content. But being a content creator and a coach are not the same thing.
No. I said something the other day. I'm not a content creator. Yeah, I understand.
But understand that there are a ton of young coaches now who aspire to be you.
Yes.
And the world certainly doesn't need any more Hugh Marrs. Maybe a couple more Toby McGeehee's not a bad thing. But,
but you know what, Hugh? You know what? Is that my posting now, none of it is sexy in inverted commas or gets the likes and views because no one's interested in the stuff I post now because it's not that cool, because it's just like, oh, here's my student Regan when he was off 10. Here's my student Regan now who's a 4 handicap golfer and this is his golf swing change. No one cares.
Yeah.
But you post something about doing something, doing this, doing that, and everyone's all over it. But so, I don't really have, but you know what's interesting? You talk about that, and Mr. Brian Manzella, who I love his stuff with Mark Jacobs, and I love listening to him talk, right? And he's got like 2,000 followers on Instagram, and the guy's got like more. He's forgotten way more shit than I even think of. I know,
than we'll ever know.
And he's got a couple of thousand followers, and this guy is like one of the greats of coaching, Mr. Brian Manzella. And anyways, it's bananas, but
it is. It's a bonkers world.
It's crazy.
It's a bonkers world.
Hey, it's been great coming on. I'll put all the stuff in the show notes below. Mate, you've been great here.
Real pleasure. Happy to help anytime. Thanks, let's arrange something, and I'll hop on a plane to Oz.
Mate, I'm all for it. I'd love to.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. All right, man. Stay well.
You too.